right here, Question Period Canada. How y'all doing? Pretty excited today. Just hoping that things are going to time out the right way. What we have lined up is this Scrum that's supposed to be live right now. It's late, but we're waiting on the signal, and we're just waiting on that. And then we'll be watching the question period, which is going to be pretty exciting. Do you think Trudeau's going to show up today? I don't know. Is he going to show up? Wednesday is supposed to be the day of the week that he comes in to answer all the questions. And from my experience, he does. I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of Trudeau this morning. Yeah. In the meanwhile, we've got this to take a peek at. Hey, Kirk, what's up? How are you today?
And this is a copy of the publicly disclosable contents of that interview. Have you had an opportunity to review the summary?
I have, yes.
And do you have any changes to make to the summary?
I do. Paragraph 13, the second sentence, shall I read it?
Let's go down to paragraph 13 first. It is on page 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
So to change it to, she recalls meeting with representatives from many of the agencies that became members of the Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force, site TF, including CSE, CSIS, and GAC-RRM, as well as, and that's the extent of the change.
As well as, right, I didn't hear the last bit.
No, that's it, as well as the Department of National Defense.
Okay, and PCO as well, does that remain in there?
Yeah, everything else remains the same.
Okay, thank you. And with that change being made, are you prepared to adopt the summary as part of your evidence before the commission today?
I am.
Thank you. So I understand that you have held various cabinet positions since 2017, which include Minister of Democratic Institutions from January 10th, 2017 until November 20th, 2019. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you are the leader of the government in the House of Commons, and you've been in that role since July 26, 2023.
Correct. And I am on maternity leave right
currently
now.
on parental leave. So I want to first start by asking you about the development of the plan to protect Canada's democracy. And so I just want to ground this in the context, the events that were occurring at the time. So in your witness statement at paragraph 4, you described that the motivation for the creation of the plan came in the context of a series of high-profile attempts by Russia to interfere with democratic elections around the world, primarily through cyber activities and disinformation campaigns. And you've also described that the plan is created against the backdrop of what's described as the Obama dilemma, which is effectively the fact that President Obama could not alert the public about intelligence relating to electoral interference because he was concerned about being viewed as a partisan actor interfering in the electoral process. So does that kind of situate?
Yeah, so I think it's important to recall that in January 2017, it was about 2 months following the U.S.
So
presidential
yeah, we've got
election,
probably a half
there
hour
was,
before question period, probably even
considerable
45
activity happening
minutes.
at the international level.
We're
and
just trying to fill it
particularly
in with a little
following what was
gold,
seen
and
as
then
very high level, very sophisticated
we're
Russian
waiting on
interference
this
in the
press
2016 presidential
scrum that's
election.
supposed to be happening right
There
now,
had
but
also been
imagine they're late.
other things going on in the world, kind of within the next 6 to 8 months, where we saw, the Brexit vote, where we saw the Macron leaks in France, the cyber attack against the German parliament, and leaks from the Bundestag. So there were a series of very high-profile cyber attacks on fellow democracies around the world. And so when the Prime Minister gave me that mandate, it was very much trying to protect Canadian democracy and Canadian elections from those kinds of high-profile, very sophisticated cyber threats, which at the time were primarily coming from Russia.
And so let's pull up that mandate letter that you received from the Prime Minister. Can I please have COM 18, please? And so this is a letter that I understand you received on February 1st, 2017 from the Prime Minister. I'll just wait for that document to be brought up. COM 18. Thank you. And the document you see on the screen, is this the letter that you received?
Yes.
Okay. And if we can go down to page 3, please. A little bit further down. Thank you. So we see the paragraph starting with, in particular, I will expect you to work with your colleagues and through established legislative, regulatory, and cabinet processes to deliver on your top priorities. And the first bullet lists, in collaboration with the Minister of National Defence and the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, lead the Government of Canada's efforts to defend the Canadian electoral process from cyber threats. This should include asking the Communications Security Establishment, CSE, to analyze risks to Canada's political and electoral activities from hackers and to release this assessment publicly, as well ask CSE to offer advice to Canada's political parties and Elections Canada on best practices when it comes to cybersecurity. I appreciate there's other bullets on that list. I will focus on that one for today. Did you, in relation to this particular aspect of your mandate, did you have any discussions with the Prime Minister about expectations for what the plan should cover and how it should operate?
Well, no, it's pretty clear in the mandate letter what my task was, and to work across government to protect our elections from cybersecurity threats.
And so, and the mandate itself is focused on cyber threats. Mm-hmm. Was the developing plan, so the plan to protect Canada's democracy, was that plan restricted to or focused on cyber threats?
No, it ended up being broader than that. How this came about, so, as when you are a minister and you get a mandate letter, this is the job that you're tasked with. It's a job description, so to speak, in terms of what the Prime Minister expects you to accomplish in your time in that portfolio. So I set about gathering information, learning about what the threats were. So I had various meetings with the different heads of agencies to understand what the threats were to Canada, focused on our elections. And through that process, I was presented with other threats to our democracy that included human intelligence, which is what led to the 4 pillars that were released publicly in January 2019.
Hey, Tony, what's up?
Canada's
Good to see you.
Plan to protect our democracy that ended up bringing in not just the
Good to
Department
see
of National
everybody.
Defense and Public Safety, but also
Sky
Global
Orange,
Affairs,
Rocky Mountain Lady,
as
Kirk,
well as Heritage,
obviously,
so that we had
Brent.
as comprehensive of a plan at the
Lisa,
time
good to see you
deal with
today.
the
What's
threats
up?
as we understood them. But really, it was a process of learning, understanding, engaging, and trying to come up with
I think we've got
plan
two Daves in the
that
room.
could
Hey,
most
Daves.
robustly protect Canada's
Blue, good morning or good
national
afternoon, morning
federal
out there?
democracy.
I'm not sure.
So let me talk to you a bit about that information gathering exercise that you've described. What did you identify or learn?
I see some
that
action
were the biggest
on what we're
threats
going to
or
be watching,
concerns
which
to
is
which the
this
plan
Scrum.
needed to respond?
Sure. So, I mean, I think one of the
But they're late. They
important
said they
parts
would have
throughout
been
all of
starting at
this
2:30.
was the understanding
Not even
that
close.
foreign interference or attempts at foreign interference, because foreign, I think it's the attempting that has gone on for a long time.
Okay, they're piling in this other room, so we're gonna start to show that is the plan. Here, we'll do this one. And see if that's going to work. You can see that we have some people here that are being somewhat active. Here we go. Oh, those people look like they're on tour. Sorry, gang. Like, these people were, man, trying to keep everything live, and they're a little late. All right, back to
Probably in
CHYSTIA
every
Gould.
election that Canada has ever had, there have been attempts at foreign interference, just like in probably every election in a democracy around the world. Probably since ancient Greece, there have been attempts at foreign interference. Whether they're successful or not is another question. And so I think that was one of the most important things. The nature of the threats have evolved over time, and in the period from 2017 to 2019, this was when threats online were becoming more of an issue that people weren't really aware of, and the security agencies themselves were also learning more about. Because if we go back to, the Russian example in the in the United States, they were using social media platforms to try and either elicit a specific outcome in the American election, or even just creating chaos, right? So that people have less trust in democracy, which feeds their interest of a national interest to say that democracy is not something that Russians, for example, should be interested in, because look at the chaos that's happening over there. We want stability. So there's many different interests at play here. The other thing that I learned was of, other countries, for example, that also had an interest, sometimes perhaps in getting a specific candidate elected or not. Whether they were successful, again, is always a question. And then the other part of it is,
I can't believe how late
may
they
have
are on this
specific
Scrum.
policy objectives as well, or they may have specific objectives with
What are you gonna
regards
do?
to influence operations. And it's really important to note that, foreign countries and actors are engaging in influence operations all the time, but they're overt. That's diplomacy, that's, trying to, have overt conversations in the public, perhaps.
They are
through the
getting
media.
it together
And
there,
then there's
it
the interference
seems.
part, which is the stuff that is covert, that they're trying to do in a sneaky way so that Canadians or politicians aren't aware of. So really learned quite a bit about what is going on. I would also say, I think learned that our security agencies are quite sophisticated in Canada and have pretty good knowledge about what is happening, but also recall that, foreign actors are trying to do this in a way so that we don't know about it. And one of the other things that I think is really important that I learned through this process is that we have to be very mindful and security agencies are about what information is disclosed publicly, because if they make a decision to disclose something publicly, they're effectively letting the foreign actor
Again,
know
we are waiting
that
on
they know
question
what they're
period.
doing.
It's
And
just
so
I
they
thought
could
that starting
lose a
early
source,
might be a
that foreign actor
good
could
idea.
change what they're doing.
And
They could go further underground.
I saw
And
this
so
scrum
we
that
need to
was
be really
scheduled
thoughtful and
for,
mindful about how and when and what
What are
is
you gonna do, though?
released, publicly, which also played a
write
really
your
big
MP,
part
I
in the
suppose.
development of
Remember
the
to
plan.
vote.
And just to ask you specifically about the sources of intelligence or information you relied on, I understand that in your role as minister, you did not receive daily packages of intelligence products.
Correct.
And I understand that you had various briefings and received information from various agencies as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can we pull up CAN 13303, please? And go to page 3. So you can see here under the heading Briefings to Ministers, a series of briefings between August 15th, 2018. And can you scroll down a little bit, please? Stopping there is good, thank you. This shows briefings to Minister of Democratic Institutions, as I said, from August 15th, 2018, down through August 23rd, 2019. We see briefings, Director CSIS, Chief CSE. Are those all meetings that you attended?
Well, I'm going to assume that I did, but I wouldn't be able to confirm the exact dates because I don't recall, but I would meet kind of on a monthly, bi-monthly basis with them.
And was the focus of the intelligence that you received focused on cyber threats, or was it broader than that?
The primary focus would be on cyber threats, both in Canada, but also what we were seeing around the world. And the purpose of including around the world is important so that we could learn from other experiences so that we would be able to protect Canada's democracy and elections against those. And there would be, if if relevant,
federal NDP member
high-
of Parliament for Courtney Alberni, a rural MP. And today
This is the
a
press
great day
conference.
for volunteer firefighters and search and rescue personnel, a great victory for all of those volunteers, their families, and the communities in where they live. We know volunteer firefighters and search and rescue personnel put their lives at risk to keep us safe. They dedicate tons of hours, thousands of hours over the course of their career, hundreds of hours a year, and they're also facing huge demands with increasing climate emergencies, wildfires, of course the toxic drug crisis. The demands and expectations of their needs are huge, and recruitment is a huge problem, especially given the inflationary crisis, and many people are having to work 2-3 jobs. So today, to see the volunteer firefighter tax credit double, again, is a huge victory. It didn't go far enough. We were pushing through my bill C-310 to see that firefighter tax credit grow from $3,000 to $10,000. We hadn't seen an increase since 2013, and that's far too long in terms of the impact on volunteer firefighters and search and rescue personnel. I want to thank the 165 communities that wrote letters, sent us petitions, that got behind it. Of course, our leader, Jagmeet Singh, who just came to Denman Island in British Columbia and Vancouver Island, met with volunteer firefighters and personnel that are involved in search and rescue. To all NDP MPs that got behind this bill, but also from members of Parliament from all parties that got behind my bill and tabled petitions over the last couple of months. We're here as New Democrats to make the House of Commons work. And that's what we did today. We pulled everybody together to get behind volunteer search and rescue personnel and search and firefighters. And that's exactly what our goal was, to make sure that we do everything we can to support them and to support the recruitment and retention of those volunteer firefighters. So today it is a big step forward. We're going to continue to push for more. I do want to single out one individual, and that's Sean Wood. He's a Parksville councillor and a former volunteer firefighter who brought this a concern to me in 2019. And as New Democrats, we always listen to those at the grassroots level. Good ideas come from our communities, and it's our job as members of Parliament to bring those forward and get those ideas brought to fruition and through legislation. And I want to thank the government for listening today and working with us. I'll take questions.
What's the party's position or your position on the Pledge of Allegiance to the King?
Well,
there's a bill.
I can't speak for the party because everyone will have a chance to vote individually. It's certainly going to be a vote that we're all going to be have the freedom and flexibility to vote how we decide. In my riding, nobody has brought that concern to me. I haven't got an email or a phone call about it at all, but you're going to see how I'm going to vote probably in about an hour and a half. It's certainly something that's, it's not a priority of mine given the serious issues that we're facing right now. We've got an inflation crisis, a climate crisis, we've got a toxic drug health emergency right now that is not being given the attention that it deserves. So this is like literally low on the scale of priorities for me. I'm here to fight to make the lives of people in my communities and all Canadians and Quebecers make their lives better, and so I'm going to continue to do that. So today I'm going to be voting shortly, and again, it's not going to make a big difference in the lives of the people in my riding. That's what I'm focused on. So. Yeah, so again, big victory today for volunteer firefighters, for rural communities, and I have 20 volunteer fire departments and 3 search and rescue fire departments in my riding. I know they're going to be ecstatic, and this is going to provide a small but a bit of relief. Also, more importantly, it's going to let them know that they're valued by all Canadians and all parliamentarians. So today is a really good victory. Good. Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, who's next? Hopefully they're not going to make us wait 15 minutes, like that somebody is up to bat. Like, I've not done one of these scrums before live, and I won't be again, like anytime soon, like without knowing more about how disorganized they are. So, gang, I'm so sorry. I thought this scrum was going to be live and lead into the question period, which it does not seem that they're doing. Let's
level descriptions
Lord,
of other potential.
we need to do better than that. Okay, well, those are just tourists. I'm so sorry, gang. I thought I had it organized. I thought starting a little bit early would be a good idea. They're too disorganized. Yeah, it's my own fault. What are we going to do here while we wait for material? I guess we've got this for an option. No, that's not it. Yep, we're going to do this. So what in the hell else does CPAC have on the go? We're jumping right in. And they've got nothing. Oh my Lord, these guys. All right, well, let's take a look at Billy Blair.
Held over approvals for certain activities within their departments that they would come to me for and seek those approvals.
And I'm just going to note that we're trying to keep things at a pace the interpreters, the simultaneous translators can keep up with. So I'll just ask you to keep that in mind. In the context that you were just describing, the way that you managed your responsibility for the various agencies, can you tell me what the role was of the ministerial directives that you might have occasion to issue with respect to any of the agencies?
One of my responsibilities as minister was to provide direction to the agencies that were under my portfolio, and the mechanism by which we would do that was with the issuance of a written ministerial directive that established priorities, for example, and I think pertinent to this discussion, I did have the opportunity to issue ministerial directions to both the RCMP and CSIS outlining what I perceive to be the priorities of those agencies, and the intention of that was to give appropriate direction to the areas that I felt they should prioritize in their work.
And did you issue such a ministerial directive with respect to CSIS during your term?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did that ministerial directive make reference of the service's responsibility to investigate foreign interference?
It specifically identified foreign interference as a priority for CSIS. As a matter of fact, in the list of priorities that were identified, foreign interference was the second on the list. And although it was not a prioritized list, I think its position there reflects the importance of which I placed upon it.
Thank you.
Bill
Now,
Blair
noting
always
that you
looks
became
like,
the Minister of Public
suspicious.
Safety after the 2019 election, what was your perspective on foreign interference at the start of your term as Minister of Public Safety?
I had the opportunity, first of all, and as I've already mentioned, I had a very long police career, and I was aware of the historically hostile activities of certain state actors with respect to Canada, and the threat that could represent to Canada's national interest, to Canadian citizens, to our critical infrastructure. As in my previous role prior to becoming the Minister of Public Safety, as the Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction, I also had the benefit of some briefings under the authority of then Minister Goodall, who was the previous Minister of Public Safety, with respect to information that was provided. And when I was appointed, when I became the Minister of Public Safety, I had the benefit of fairly extensive briefings with respect to the intelligence and the law enforcement situation, the public safety situation in the country, which included briefings with respect to issues around the hostile activities of state actors and the wide variety of risks that represented.
Well, since you've mentioned that, let me ask the court operator to pull up WIT 64. And if you can scroll to it, paragraph 13 of the interview summary of Minister Blair. Minister, you can see that in paragraph 13 of your interview summary, there's a description of your account of a briefing you received by CSIS after the 2019 election. Is this one of those briefings of the type you were just describing?
Yes, it is.
And can you be more particular about this one as it's discussed in your interview summary, the one about the 2019 Don Valley North Liberal Party of Canada nomination?
As part of a number of briefings that was provided to me by the director of CSIS, there was a discussion about concerns that they had identified through their intelligence reporting about the nomination process in 2019 that occurred in Don Valley North. And they provided me with information with respect to intelligence that they had received that called into question that nomination process, suggesting that there may have been irregularities in the number of the people that participated in that, and the possibility that it had been influenced in some way by the activities of the People's Republic of China or representatives of that country.
And in your in paragraph 13 of your interview summary, you describe your reaction to that briefing. If you look at the sort of second half of the paragraph, you have some numbered points about your reaction.
Yes, sir. As I've indicated in previous roles in both policing and in my previous roles in government, I have a fairly good understanding of the nature of intelligence. Intelligence isn't necessarily factual evidence of what took place. If someone perceives that this has happened, and so I made some inquiries during that briefing with respect to the source of that intelligence, that information, on to determine if from CSIS's perspective, the reliability of that individual, if there was corroborating evidence to support the intelligence that had been received, if there was other corroboration or effort to substantiate that allegation. They indicated to me that they did not at that time have other corroborating evidence in any way to substantiate that. I also made inquiries if there was any evidence beyond the nomination process itself of interference in the electoral process that we had just gone through in the 2019 election. And they did not indicate at that time to me that there had been any impact in that riding, in any evidence of interference following. Their concerns were limited only to the nomination process. And my perception of that was, and my last question, was there any suggestion that the candidate was knowledgeable and aware of that, and they had no information to corroborate that?
Thank you. And perhaps if the court operator could call up a CAN 3326. Minister Blair, as you discussed in your in-camera evidence, you not long after your appointment as minister, you had an initiative, and this was mentioned by your department in their evidence yesterday, so I'll just ask you again from your perspective as the minister, if you can start by describing the motion on November 18th, 2020, to which the document we now have on the screen was a response, and why you responded to it with this report and letter to the MPs.
Yes, well, there had been a motion on November 18th, 2020 in the House of Commons when the House sought information on what the government was doing to address threats to the security, prosperity, and democratic institutions right across the country. And in response to that, we worked very closely with my department and some excellent policy work that was done by my deputy minister and his team, along with my ministry office. We crafted a response to that motion. We also had discussion about, frankly, tabling a response to a motion. In my experience, those don't not always receive the full attention of every member of Parliament or the attention of Canadians. And I felt that it was very important. This information, I think, in order for Canada to defend its institutions, in order to us to take the steps necessary to respond to the threat of foreign interference, it was necessary to inform my parliamentary colleagues, but also to inform Canadians of the nature of that threat, give them information on what risk it represented, and also information on how they could then respond. What I wanted to tell my colleagues what the government was doing, but also to tell Canadians if they saw evidence of foreign interference. The response that is provided in this document did not limit itself, quite frankly, to just political interference. There was a great deal of concern, which frankly I still hold, with respect to the hostile activities of state actors in interfering with a number of our critical infrastructure, our life sciences and health sciences institutions, our research capabilities. There are a number of cyber threats that are also quite significant and deeply concerning to our national interest. And the purpose of this letter was to inform my parliamentary colleagues, and through my parliamentary colleagues, by publishing this document and making it and tabling it in Parliament, to inform Canadians about the full nature of this threat, and to inform Canadians about what their government was doing in response to it.
Thank you. And with respect to a particular topic, this is a report of some 12 pages long, but if I could take you to one little section of it and ask for your comments. If the court operator could scroll down to page 11 of this report. And if you look down under the heading, Protecting Our Citizens and Communities, there's a paragraph that begins, Canada does not tolerate harassment or intimidation of its citizens. And you might recollect that in both your interview and in your in-camera evidence, we explored this issue of your concern as Minister for diaspora communities in Canada.
All right, gang,
just noting that this is a part of your report.
Getting rid of these guys.
Comment on that for the Commissioner, please.
Yes, sir.
We're getting rid of these guys, and question period has started. Just need to get you that window, if we can.
Car ton bras c'est porter l'épée on God for
This is question period.
Let the doors be open. Que l'on ouvre les portes.
10 or 15 minutes before it actually kicks off.
Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. The honorable
going to quash the sound while I do our greetings to everybody that I think is in the room today. Hi, Cicely. How are you? Chance, what is up? Silvio, Rhonda, Cuba bound. Kirk, obviously. Hey, Patty, what's up? How are you doing today? Calamaru, good day, good day. Hi, Sheila, I'm sure you're kicking around here somewhere as well. Electronic Progression, good day, good day. There's so many people. Sky Orange, what is up? Always a pleasure. Taco Takio, what's up? Mother of the Drummers, yo, yo. And Freedom, Freedom, hello, hello. If I missed anybody, I didn't mean to. We'll say greetings all the time. Anyway, we'll be back to their volume. Let's give them some.
Job out west. Congrats to Greenbow, and I encourage everyone to look for their high-protein, high-fiber product online or in your stores.
The honourable member from Edmonton Manning.
Mr. Speaker, a year ago, I was on an official visit to Scandinavia when my father died unexpectedly. It was not possible to return to Lebanon to mourn with my family. My father taught me that humans are more alike than different. He taught me to respect those of different races and those who have different thoughts and viewpoints. It was not just words, that is the way he lived. He believed in bringing people together, not pushing them apart. He wanted to build people up, not tear them down. He taught me to put the needs of others first. I remember his wisdom every day and try to follow his example. On the first anniversary of his death, I rise to remember and to pay tribute to Jaber Ali Abul Taif. He taught me compassionate and service. The words thank you don't seem to be enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has over 90,000 volunteer firefighters who put their lives on the line for us every day. We depend on them for the first line of defense for many types of emergencies, as they provide essential fire and emergency services to our communities. Their dedication deserves our continued support. That's why I advocated for an increase in the tax credits for volunteer firefighters and search and rescue volunteers in the 2024 federal budget. And I'm proud of today's announcement of the increased tax credit and added supports, which recognizes volunteer firefighters' commitment to public service. With my colleagues, the parliamentary secretaries from Longueuil, Charles de Malogne, and from Cambridge, North Dumfries, we hosted a roundtable discussion with rural fire chiefs from Waterloo region to learn how we can best support those who keep us safe. Supports like helping with recruitment and retention, equipment costs, and health and wellness supports, and an increase of tax credits for volunteers. I'll continue to advocate on their behalf as they continue to protect us all. To our firefighters, thank you.
The honourable member for Beauport-les-Moulous. For 40 years, the OQPAC, Quebec Organization for People with Cancer, has been working in the Capitale Nationale region to help people suffering from this terrible disease and their loved ones. It welcomes, accompanies, listens to, supports, and provides relief to people who are all too often left to their own devices in the face of this illness and the disarray that it brings. These are the watchwords of the OQPAC. Very few organizations focus their activities and services on the specific needs of cancer sufferers and their loved ones. OQPAC does this wonderfully. In 2022 and 2023, this organization helped more than 3,000 people. Just imagine how many people it has helped over the past 40 years through its numerous activities, programs, groups, and individual consultations. Bravo to the dedicated members of the board of directors, to the volunteers, and to the general manager, Mr. Francis Lemieux. Long live OQPAC.
L'honorable député de London West.
As we commemorate the 30th year since the genocide against the Tutsis in 1994, I reflect on the journey of reconciliation, which is a never-ending road. I can't help but notice that those who have reconciled and lived side by side did it because justice prevailed. So today, on behalf of my constituents and survivors who are still grappling with what happened in April 1994, I ask for two things, Mr. Speaker. One, that we as Canada, being a home to many survivors and families of survivors, that we designate the FDLR as a terrorist organization as it continues to kill many Tutsis in the region. Number two, that we commit to bringing the genocide participants to justice, Romeo Dallaire recently pointed to the many that have made Canada their home and live free without consequences. Last week, I saw firsthand how transformative it is when perpetrators ask for forgiveness and victims are able to provide it. There's no healing for the many grieved hearts who relive the genocide over and over again every April. And there's no justice if we leave room for denialism, revisionism, and debates that perpetrate anti-Tutsi hate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Today marks the 10th anniversary of the passing of the late Jim Flaherty, former Finance Minister of Canada. At the time, the news of his passing was a shock to many colleagues in this place. Sometimes a stark recognition of our own mortality is a reminder that puts our minor differences in perspective. His career was dedicated to public service. In fact, his favorite speech was entitled "Public Service is Good for You," challenging young people to enter careers of public service for its reward and fulfilling nature. Many of his accomplishments will withstand the test of time: the Registered Disability Savings Plan, the Working Income Tax Benefit, and the start of Ready, Willing, and Able. While Jim would have strong opinions on the challenges facing the country today and the budget, I suspect what would matter most are the many accomplishments of Christine and the pride he would have in his 3 boys: Quinn, who recently welcomed a child, Galen, who will marry this summer, and John, who works at the Ability Centre. Let us remember Jim fondly, and let us extol the virtues of public service and encourage others to rise to the challenge to serve the public good.
All right, just another quick hello to some more people that have joined the room. I see The Prophet, how are you? Good to see you. Hello, Franco Mono from Vancouver. Good to see you. We're going to watch some Canadian federal politics here in a moment. We don't need to hear what Nathaniel Erskine Smith is saying right now. Let's take a look, though.
By the Governor General in 2019, and I don't have the time to list off her many well-earned awards and honors. But on a personal note, let me say that she was also very kind with her time. If you haven't seen Ali Reed's documentary about Anne, the woman who loves giraffes, you should. Anne took the time to join us and patiently answer questions at a screening of the film some 5 years ago. She left an impression on all of us that night, just as she now leaves a legacy for all of us in the Anne Innes Dag Foundation, dedicated to promoting the harmonious coexistence of humans and wildlife, and built on Anne's belief that we should treat people, animals, and their surroundings with the same respect.
The honourable member from Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce April is Oral Health Month, featuring National Dental Hygienist Week from April 4th to 10th. This annual event is sponsored by Canadian Dental Hygienists Association and focuses on the importance of maintaining good oral health practices and helping Canadians understand the role of dental hygiene profession in preventing and addressing oral health issues. Over 31,000 dental hygienists nationwide celebrate this week under the theme of Oral Health for Total Health, highlighting that taking care of your mouth, teeth, and gums have a positive impact on other aspects of our lives. As the federal government roll out the new Canadian Dental Care Plan, which has a focus on preventive care, dental hygienists will play a front and center role to help improve oral health outcomes for all Canadians. This April, let's help everyone in Canada learn about oral health for total health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Portage Lisker.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has added more to the national debt than all previous Prime Ministers combined. This costly coalition's out-of-control spending has resulted in Canada's $46 billion in spending just to service our debt. This is more money than the federal government sends to provinces for health care. Their deficits are fueling inflation and have driven up interest rates. But it's not just Conservatives pointing this out, Mr. Speaker. Both the Bank of Canada and former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley told the Prime Minister that he was pressing on the inflationary gas pedal. And now a leading economist says interest rates cuts may be delayed because of high government spending. But Conservatives have a plan to fix the budget. In next week's budget, the Liberals need to cap the spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule to bring down interest rates and inflation. They must find $1 in savings for every new dollar in spending. It's just common sense. Because my 3-month-old daughter Maeve and her generation should not be shackled to pay the bill of the reckless spending of this costly coalition.
The honourable member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Speaker, I stand in the House today with a heavy heart as we mourn one of the worst earthquakes to strike Taiwan in the last 25 years, with at least 16 dead and more than 1,000 people injured. Many homes and businesses have been destroyed and communities shattered. In the face of this tragedy, we witness the remarkable resilience of the Taiwanese people. As we extend our thoughts and prayers to those affected, let us also recognize the unwavering determination of the Taiwanese people. It's important to acknowledge that Taiwan has been an ally to so many nations in their times of need. Their generosity and compassion have touched lives around the world.
These guys are often late.
Now it is our turn to offer our unwavering support to the people of Taiwan. In this time of devastation, Canada extends our hand in friendship and assistance to Taiwan as they recover from this earthquake. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years, Northern Canadians cannot afford this Prime Minister anymore. Housing starts are at historic lows according to a recent RBC report, and this trend is only going to get worse under these NDP Liberals. Nunavut is deep in this housing crisis with over 3,000 homes desperately needed and climbing, with little being done by this Prime Minister. The NDP Liberal Prime Minister has no plan to fix the housing crisis according to his own Housing Department CEO. And making life far worse, the Liberal carbon tax is applied to farmers. A package of hot dogs in Nunavut is $19. 1 gallon of ice cream is $29. 1 kilogram of bacon is $42. Canadians are tired of being told that they're better off under this Prime Minister because it simply isn't true. When will this Prime Minister make life better in the North, axe the tax on farmers, and build the homes?
The honourable member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, Canadians require 64% of their pre-tax income to afford housing, if they can even find housing. Michelle from Kawartha Lakes found work in Toronto, but is couch surfing because she, like 9 in 10 Canadians in this country, believe they will never own a home. We are a G7 country, and it is over $1,900 for a one-bedroom apartment. Rent has doubled, mortgage defaults are on the rise, and housing starts are down. 10 cities across this country look like scenes from the Great Depression, and this Prime Minister has the audacity to say he's doing a great job. He's a failure. His solution? Increase the carbon tax by 23%, which will drive up housing prices even more. Canadians know better, and so do Conservatives. We will incentivize municipalities to build houses people can afford, and we will axe the tax to make the materials needed to build houses affordable. We will bring it home.
The honourable member from Don Valley West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I congratulate the community at Bessborough Drive Elementary and Middle School on its 100th anniversary. With its opening in December 1923, Bessborough became the first public school in Leaside and even served as the community's town hall. Wow. For a century, Bessborough Public School has been a place of academic excellence, committed to nurturing the minds of generations past, present, and future. Through my regular conversations with students, parents, and faculty, it's abundantly clear that Bessborough is more than an institution. It holds a special place in the hearts of many, with a legacy of familial ties spanning generations, from grandparents and parents to today's students, all proudly waving the Bessborough flag. On this great occasion, I extend my deep appreciation to the dedicated faculty, volunteers, and students who have contributed to the enduring legacy of Bessborough Public School. May this milestone continue excellence for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here, here.
It must be time. Colleagues, you may want to keep the noise down because we're going to be listening to the next intervention in the Nuktatuk. The honourable member from Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't always have celebratory statements in this place. Although many people are still struggling, there are some worth sharing. Nunavut reached a milestone because of Tagak Curley's vision. and that because Tagakurli's vision became a reality. I thank him for retaining Inuit laws, values, and principles taught to him by our ancestors. I thank him for helping to modernize Inuit society by leading the way for Inuit to govern. Through his vision, community negotiators worked with elders and community members what terms to include in what would later become the Nunavut Land Claim Agreement. I thank the community negotiators.
The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher-les Patriotes Verchères. To promote the French language in Quebec, we need to share it with all new Quebecers. But of course, our national language can't be learned overnight. And that's why I'd like to salute the initiative by Provincial and Boucherville that warmed the hearts of all Quebecers. The grocery store provides all its new employees with a button that reads, J'apprends le français, merci de parler lentement, which means I'm learning French. Thank you for speaking slowly. What an extraordinary way to encourage employees while they learn. What an extraordinary way to encourage customers to take part in this learning process through cooperation, patience, and kindness. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I'd like to thank the owner of Provigo, Mona Turbide, and the person in charge of the French language training, Martine Colombe. I'd also like to congratulate all the French education workers for their perseverance, and I hope that this initiative will snowball throughout Quebec. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Barrie Innisfil.
Oh my
Canadian
Lord.
families and businesses are paying the price with an NDP Liberal government that's addicted to debt and deficits. Record high deficits and carbon taxes driving up inflation are increasing the costs on everything, including the necessities of life. Interest rate increases fueled by NDP Liberal spending and increased debt is punishing Canadian families and businesses, and we're just now starting to see the full impact increases in mortgage rates are having on mortgage renewals, and it's a crisis. No Prime Minister has added more to the national debt than this one, and through it all, he's been aided and abetted by his NDP coalition partners. Anyone who has any sense at all knows you don't put more fuel on an already out-of-control debt and deficit fire. It's time for a return to fiscal common sense in this country that sees a government cap spending to bring down interest rates and inflation with a dollar-for-dollar rule that finds $1 in savings for every new dollar spent. Common sense conservatives will not support the budget unless it axes the tax, builds homes, not photo ops, and caps spending.
Here, here, here. The Honourable Member from Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. April is Sikh Heritage Month, and no matter where it is you go in Canada, you'll find an intense amount of pride in Sikh heritage, Mr. Speaker. The many contributions in every aspect of our society. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to stand in my place and recognize the month as a significant time for us to appreciate, love, and better understand Sikhism and how it contributes to the very fabric of Canadian society, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage members to visit Gurdwara, talk to members of our Punjabi heritage community, get a better understanding of how Sikhism affects our Canadian heritage. It's something all of us should embrace, no matter what our faith is, Mr. Speaker. So let's encourage our constituents to get that better understanding of Sikhism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're 9 minutes late.
Questions.
Here we go. Here we go.
Questions.
Let's get it going. Here we go.
This Prime Minister's incompetence is just not worth the cost. With his excessive spending at the federal level, he has caused so many messes in the military, immigration, inflation, the housing market, and so many more. But instead of cleaning up his own mess, he's just creating more problems with expensive promises that interfere with provincial jurisdiction. Why is this Liberal Prime Minister bringing his incompetence into areas of Quebec competency. The Honourable Minister of Public Services.
No, Trudeau.
Mr. Speaker, it's quite
Trudeau
humorous to
didn't
hear
show.
the word incompetence in the mouth of the Leader of the Opposition when he was Housing Minister, who created only 6 affordable housing units for the whole country during his term. Recently, he accused Quebec municipalities of being incompetent. On March 15th, with Quebec City, we started 324 affordable housing units. Who's really incompetent here? The Leader of the Opposition with his 6 units, or Quebec municipalities with hundreds? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. When I was Housing Minister, housing costs were half of what they are today. And hundreds of thousands of housing units were created with low interest rates. Today, we learned that the Bank of Canada will not be lowering interest rates. And the Governor of the Bank of Canada has already said that if governments spend too much, interest rates will remain high, which will send people into bankruptcy. Will this Prime Minister finally accept my common sense plan? A dollar-for-dollar plan to balance the budget and bring down interest rates. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition was just talking about the government of Quebec, and I talked about Quebec municipalities. Now, with the Quebec government, we signed an agreement to create 8,000 new affordable housing units. During his term as Housing Minister, the Leader of the Opposition created 6 affordable housing units. And yet, he called Quebec municipalities incompetent. When will he agree to come with me to meet with the Quebec City leaders to apologize in person?
The Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'll never apologize for keeping housing costs low when I was the Minister of Housing. But if you were hoping for some interest rate relief today as a mortgage holder, as someone with a small business loan or a line of credit, you got some bad news that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Rates are staying high long because, as the Governor of the Bank of Canada said, if government spending grows, then interest rates will have to stay high to combat the resulting inflation. Why won't the Prime Minister accept my common sense plan to fix the budget with a dollar-for-dollar law to bring down rates?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, it's possible to be prudent fiscally and have strong social programs as well. That's exactly what our government does. With the AAA credit rating, with the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and with historically low unemployment. At the same time, we have a national school food program on the table of $1 billion, Mr. Speaker, supports for childcare and early learning, as well as for renters and homeowners. That's what we do on this side of the House. Every day is a great day to fight for Canadians.
She's got the worst voice in the world.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Every day is not a great day when you're living in a tent city, or when you've had your mortgage double, or when you are with the families 1 in 4 children who can't get enough food, and they put forward a food program that doesn't have any food. Instead, what they've done is doubled the national debt and driven up interest rates. Today, we learned that the Bank of Canada is unable to bring rates down because the Prime Minister continues to make massive multi-billion-dollar inflationary spending. Why won't he follow my common sense plan to bring down the deficit and the rates?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Wages are growing faster than inflation. Under the Conservatives, poverty was at 14.5%. When we replaced the Conservatives, we brought it down to 7.4%. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest in Canadians with the supports for affordable housing, for renters, for early learning and childcare, and because of our work, we will make life fairer for Canadians, unlike the Conservative leader who is here for himself. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we're finding out today from the Bank of Canada that the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. In September, the bank governor said that if government spending were to grow, then interest rates would have to stay high. That was echoed by the former bank governor and incoming Liberal leader, Mark Carney, who indicated that he does not expect rates to fall quickly, and that is partly because of a lack of fiscal discipline. So if he won't listen to me, why won't he listen to his successor and understand that he's not worth the cost of high interest rates?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Trudeau's worth all of these expenses? Oh, we'll take no lessons. This little chihuahua, this little weasel is gonna bite your ankle. I kind of like FPC in a way, but get ready. I'm building it up for some reason. I don't know why. You explain to me what the point of what Fergus is doing right now is.
Mr. Speaker, I hope the Conservative will listen this time because Canadians are watching at home. Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservative. On this side of the House, we have a plan to build more houses. We have a plan to build more prosperity in this country. We have a plan to create more jobs, Mr. Speaker. On the other side, they have slogan, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are smart. They understand that slogans don't build homes. They understand that slogan don't create jobs. They understand that slogan don't create prosperity. Mr. Speaker, every day is a good day to fight for Canadians. That's what we're going to do.
It's out of hand, guys. It's out of hand already. And I'm having a real tough time with my signal, but nothing you can
do. Si on continue comme ça, je suis...
If this goes on, I'm certain that the honourable member for La Prairie will think that it's about him. The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, for 3 weeks, the Prime Minister has been making pre-budget announcements in Quebec jurisdiction, but not today. Today, he is at the foreign interference inquiry, so he doesn't have time for domestic interference. Health, schools, housing, dental care, childcare. It's the Liberals, not the Bloc, who think they are governing Quebec. Ottawa has the money, but Quebec has the expertise. If Ottawa wants to help Quebec, it should just increase transfers. What is this government waiting for? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's always a good time to speak about the impacts that government investments have for Quebecers. Let's start with childcare, a $6 billion investment over 4 years, which will help families and especially women. 35,000 new childcare spots, which will of course help families, which will reduce poverty, increase gender equality, help children, all while respecting Quebec jurisdiction. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, this is a real budget striptease. One little piece at a time. At the rate it's going, the budget lockdown on April 16th will be no longer than 5 minutes. There'll be nothing left to announce. And what will be left to spend after using billions of dollars to interfere with Quebec's jurisdiction? I know that competence would interfere with this Liberal government's brand. Look at Phoenix, passports, ArriveCan, asylum seekers, but that's no reason to violate Quebec jurisdiction. Could this government please
All right, guys, we're having some problems. We're going to do this one and see what we can clean up. Sorry, gang, we'll be right back to the show. It'll only take a second. Sorry, gang, I know that this is a mess, but like trying to stream from CPAC, they don't want you doing that. Oh, well. We will be back very, very shortly.
They're back on Indigenous people.
Especially lower income Quebecers.
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
Yesterday, the Assembly of First Nations made it clear that this government is letting down Indigenous people. Right now, the Indigenous funding gap in infrastructure has risen to an astronomical $350 billion. That's not just a number on paper. That means Indigenous people are living in moldy homes. That means Indigenous people don't have access to clean drinking water. Why did this Liberal government turn their back on Indigenous people?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for decades and decades, Canada has underinvested in Indigenous communities, and this government is putting a stop to that. We've increased funding for housing on First Nations by 1,100%, Mr. Speaker, and while we know there is a long way to go, I want to thank the AFN for co-writing this report with us. It's very important to understand the size of the gap so that we can work even more quickly to close it together.
It's not just Indigenous people that this government is letting down, it's also Canadians living with disabilities. Right now, Canadians living with disabilities are disproportionately living in poverty. And according to Angus Reid, 90% of Canadians support a Canadian disability benefit. But this Liberal government continues to delay the implementation of this benefit, and the Conservatives voted against it. So why is this government continuing to delay? Enough is enough. When will people get their checks? When will people actually get the benefit?
Here, here.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and People with Disabilities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member knows extremely well that Canada Disability Benefit is another concrete step to reduce poverty and to support Canadians who need it the most, Mr. Speaker. This is our top priority. We're on track to deliver the benefit, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of nothing without us, I want to take an opportunity to thank the disability community for their relentless advocacy and for the work that they have been doing, Mr. Speaker. We will get it right and we will get it out for Canadians living with disabilities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
Tina from Orangeville just sent me a photo from the Orangeville Food Bank. There's no juice, there's no cereal, and there's almost no diapers. This is because the people who used to donate food are now lined up for food. This is actually Canada after 8 years of this corrupt, incompetent NDP Liberal government.
That's right.
Will the Prime Minister finally show he has even a modicum of compassion for Canadians, pass Conservative Bill C-234 that will take all carbon taxes off all farmers so Canadians can once again afford food?
Common sense. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
It is important in this country, and certainly Canadians understand that we address the climate crisis that is facing us. There are significant costs that we are facing, including issues around wildfires as we move forward, if we do not address climate change. But it is also important that we do that in a manner that is affordable. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back from the carbon rebate than they pay in the price on pollution. If you are going to take it away, as the Leader of the Opposition would do, you are actually attacking the poorest members in our society. Shame on you.
It gets more back in the rebate.
I'm going to ask all members, please, to not take the floor until the person who has the microphone has the opportunity to speak to all members, so we can hear the questions clearly, and we can also hear the answers clearly. The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
The great Liberal lies. The budget will balance itself, and the rebate check is larger than the cost of the carbon tax. Everyone knows that is not actually what's happened. And you know who else has joined the carbon tax revolt? 6 premiers in this country who are calling for a carbon tax summit. Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Will this out-of-touch Prime Minister actually call this conference the Carbon Tax Summit, or is he too busy hiding because he called the premiers liars?
So colleagues, I'd like to remind all colleagues on all sides of the House that we must be very careful about using the word lies. Although it wasn't directed at an individual, it is really important that we not use language, as you know, that it can be disturbing and can disturb the affairs of the House. The Honourable Minister.
He thinks he's going to control.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, on this side of the House, we actually believe in facts and we believe in science. The Honourable Member makes statements that actually have zero basis in fact. 200 economists in this country signed a letter last to 2 weeks ago saying that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says that 8 out of 10 Canadians get money back. They can make up all of the things that they want to, but the facts are on our side. It is an issue that addresses affordability for Canadians, particularly those on modest incomes. It is a plan to address climate change. Those reckless, irresponsible Conservatives on the other side of the House should be ashamed.
Again, I'd like to remind members to please stay away from language that could be, that certainly it's getting closer and closer to unparliamentary. The Honourable Member from Chilliwack Hope.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, many Canadians can no longer afford to feed their families. Last year, 2 million Canadians visited food banks in a single month alone. But instead of bringing down the cost of food, the Prime Minister increased the carbon tax on groceries by 23% on April 1st. Clearly, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Instead of making things worse, will the Prime Minister finally cut the cost of food by adopting Conservative Bill C-234 to take all carbon taxes off of farmers in next week's budget?
Yeah, that's right.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
It's important that we talk in this House about all of the supports that we're providing to farmers and the agricultural community in the context of our fight against climate change, Mr. Speaker. But I would also point out that after having Conservative senators threaten female senators on amendments on this bill, this is a Conservative private member's bill that they can prioritize at any moment and bring to a vote in this House. It's up to them. C-234's fate is decided on the Conservative side of the House, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is completely out of touch with ordinary Canadians who can't feed their families with phony Liberal photo ops. Canadians are already lining up at the food banks in record numbers, and increasing the carbon tax on farmers and food is only making things worse. 70% of Canadians want this government to axe the tax, and half a dozen premiers are demanding an emergency meeting on the carbon tax crisis. So will the Prime Minister stop hiding and hold a carbon tax conference with the premiers and listen to their plans to axe the tax?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I would implore the Conservatives in opposition to actually use facts when they actually make statements. 200 economists in this country have validated the fact that the carbon price is the most efficient way to reduce emissions and is done in a manner that is affordable. When Premier Moe actually came before the committee a couple of weeks ago, journalists actually called the statements that he was making, which are the same as what this fellow is making, a parade of nonsense and completely dishonest. I totally agree.
Like that means anything because Wilkinson agrees.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, rents have doubled, and our youth can no longer dream of buying your first home. Record lines at food banks. Everything this Prime Minister touches just withers. He's breaking everything in Ottawa, and now he wants to bring his incompetence to Quebec with these centralizing pre-budget announcements. Will the Prime Minister finally understand that this is just making things worse for Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, we are investing to build housing in Quebec. For example, the Accelerated Housing Fund in Quebec has enabled us to sign an agreement with the province, $1.8 billion, to build 8,000 affordable housing units throughout the province. The Conservatives are against that investment. It's incredible. We will continue to invest to improve the situation and build affordable housing more quickly. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, How can we trust this government when we think of the way they manage everything, the border, the armed forces, ArriveCAN, EI? Everything this government does goes wrong for 8 years, and now they're adding insult to injury by interfering with Quebec jurisdiction. Does this Prime Minister understand that this will make the situation worse for Quebecers and all Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Public Services. My colleague, the Minister for Housing, spoke about the 8,000 affordable housing units that will be built by Quebec municipalities. We already know that the leader of the opposition had 6 affordable housing units built when he was Minister of Housing.
Duclos
and what
is
the
so
member
creepy.
may not know
Who
is that
thinks
it's an
Duclos
own
is creepy?
riding. There is a project that built 163 affordable housing units, which is about 25 times more than his leader managed to build throughout his entire term and throughout the entire country. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Now, in the expression area of jurisdiction, there's the word jurisdiction. When you have a toothache, you don't call up the barber, and you shouldn't call up the federal government either. Federal dental coverage is still not available, and yet already everyone is mad at Ottawa. Seniors are mad because they were promised free dental care, but instead they're going to have to pay. Dentists are mad because Ottawa is blaming them. And all of this because Ottawa, which knows nothing about the matter, promised free dental care without totting up the bill. Why not instead act like the tooth fairy and slip the money under Quebec's pillow? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, it is essential that everyone throughout the country and each and every Quebecer can receive dental care. That is our objective, and that is what we will do. In the spirit of cooperation, I will continue to work with the government of Quebec. The Bloc Québécois is always trying to pick arguments and find problems, whereas our government is finding solutions and ensuring that everyone gets the health care they need. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, Ottawa could send money to Quebec's health insurance program for dental care. Quebec is ready to do that, but Ottawa is instead creating red tape, redundancy, and is making everyone mad, even though the program hasn't even started yet. With housing, Ottawa could give the money right away, but instead it's going to lead to a constitutional conflict until 2025. The federal government is not like King Midas. Instead of touching things and they turn to gold, it touches things and they turn to mold. Why continue interfering with Quebec jurisdiction? Why would we let them do that when everything takes longer and is ultimately worse? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, the system for dental coverage is simple. People will receive a card, and with that card, dentists throughout the country can use the same system as they do with any other kind of dental insurance, and then very easily, patients will receive necessary services. If Quebec wishes to manage the system, that's not a problem. We can work together. However, it's absolutely essential that the service be available immediately for Quebecers, and that's what we'll do.
The Honourable Member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, Canadians are struggling to put food on the table. Food banks received a record 2 million visits in a single month last year alone, and a million more Canadians are expected to visit food banks again this year. The carbon tax is driving up the cost of groceries and everything else. Struggling families are desperate for relief in next week's budget. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister axe the carbon tax on farmers so the food prices can go down?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Honourable Member is saying things that are devoid of facts, and in fact, what she is proposing will actually take money away from folks who live on modest incomes. 8 out of 10 families get more money back than they pay in the price on pollution, and it works directly inverse to income. It's those people that live on most modest incomes that would be most impacted by their plan to cut the carbon rebate. That is reckless, that is irresponsible, and it puts at risk people who live in this country on modest incomes.
The chair did not hear the comments by the minister. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying attention, but there is so important for members to not use language which can be disturbing to the affairs of the House. The honourable member from Battleford Lloydminster.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are painfully aware that this Prime Minister and his NDP Liberal government are not worth the cost. Last week's carbon tax hike is driving up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. Families are struggling, like I said, to put food on the table, and they cannot afford higher costs. Next week's budget must take the foot off the gas of the rising grocery prices. So once again, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister axe the tax on farmers and make food more affordable for Canadians?
Absolutely. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would suggest to my honourable colleague across the House, who is from the great province of Saskatchewan, that she go and have a conversation with Dr. Brent Dolter at the University of Regina, who has said 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back, and it's those that actually live on modest incomes that do the best on a net benefit basis. It is an affordability program, but it is also a program to address the climate crisis, which imperils the future of our children. The fact that these folks have zero plan to address the climate issue and they don't seem to care at all about it is reckless and it is irresponsible.
I'm certain all members would like to listen to the honourable member from Northumberland Peterborough South ask his question and to receive a question, an answer and response. The honourable member.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has a superpower. It's the ability to spend other people's money. But I'd like to remind him that it's not his money he's spending. It's the hard-earned dollars of Canadians. He is clear he has no respect for Canadians or their hard-earned dollars. Mr. Speaker, he's just not worth the cost. Will his government commit to a pay-as-you-go rule in the upcoming budget to help fix the financial disaster they caused?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, an accurate representation of the facts would be the following. First of all, we have a AAA credit rating. That's by an independent, objective observer of our economy. Second of all, with regards to expenditures, we on this side of the House invest in Canadians, especially in vulnerable Canadians. $10 a day child care, early childhood learning and education, a national school program. Meanwhile, they vote against. They vote against dental care. They vote against pharmacare. Mr. Speaker, every day is a great day to fight for Canadians, and that's exactly what we'll do.
The honourable member from Northumberland Peterborough South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Liberals deflect, deny, and gaslight, common sense Conservatives will remain laser focused on the affordability crisis. Bill C-234 is back before this House, and the Liberals have a chance to help Canadians by reducing food costs, by reducing the burden on farmers, which will ultimately make everything more affordable. Will they finally give farmers a break? Will they finally give Canadians a break by reducing and eliminating the carbon tax on farmers?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Bill C-234 is a Conservative private member's bill that party can elect to bring to this House for a vote at any time. I would invite the honourable member to talk to his House leadership, and we'll get on with the vote for C-234.
L'honorable député de Rosemont.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, rent is expensive, groceries are expensive, everything is expensive. Quebecers are suffering, while the CEOs of big grocery stores are gilding their pockets on their backs. Instead of making this lot pay their fair share, the Liberals are giving them a $60 billion gift. Thank you who? Thank you to the Conservatives who gave this money, our money, when they were in power. money that could be invested in social and affordable housing, in health, or in the fight against the climate crisis. But no, the Liberals prefer to give it to rich CEOs. Why do the Liberals continue to gild the pockets of big business? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. Mr. Speaker, my colleague will admit that we do invest for the most vulnerable Canadians throughout the country. We also invest in childcare, we invest in housing, and my colleague knows full well that the best way to stabilise grocery prices is to have more competitivity in our country, and that is exactly what we have done with the biggest competitivity reform in history. Everyone here knows that we want to help Canadians, and that is what we are doing and what we'll continue to do.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals' childcare plan forgets childcare workers, 96% whom are women, many facing a burnout crisis. And the recent Liberal announcement falls short of what experts are calling for. Childhood educators need better wages and working conditions to improve retention and recruitment. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are pushing privatized childcare that would even hurt workers even more. When will the minister stop with the disrespect and deliver a workforce strategy that allows workers to live in dignity?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question and her continued advocacy on behalf of early learning childcare workers. Our government continues to work with the provinces and territories, as evidenced most recently with our budget announcement, which includes loan forgiveness for early childhood educators who choose to work in rural and remote communities where we see the need for more educators and more childcare spaces. We'll continue to work on the workforce strategies with the provinces and territories to support this workforce.
Oh, man.
I've been watching from St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, tourism is one of the most important pillars of Atlantic Canada's economy. In my riding of St. John's East, the Bell Island Heritage Society #2 Mine Tour and Community Museum is a hidden gem. Recognized as a world-class destination, they are helping attract tourists to experience for themselves what our community has to offer. This, in turn, supports our local economy. Can the Minister for CORT tell us what efforts are being made to help our booming tourism sector grow even more, specifically in Atlantic Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Big things are happening on the East Coast. In February, I was with the Minister of Tourism to announce the signing of the Atlantic Canada Agreement on Tourism. This $30 million agreement gives a major boost to more than 7,500 tourism businesses throughout Atlantic Canada. This support creates year-round opportunities, fuels innovative marketing, grows our Indigenous product, and brings more visitors to our beautiful corner of the world. With their breathtaking landscapes, delectable cuisine, and renowned hospitality, our region has so much to offer, and we're pulling out all the stops. You put Atlantic Canada on your bucket list this year.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. $500 billion later, and without controlling spending, this is the result. The cost of rent has doubled. 1 child in 4 in Canada does not have enough to eat, and 2 million Canadians have to go to food banks. That is the Liberal record after 8 years of this Prime Minister's mismanagement. And because the Prime Minister has invaded provincial jurisdictions, Quebecers' lives have become worse. The same for Canadians' lives. Will the Prime Minister withdraw from provincial jurisdictions and stop making life worse for Quebecers and Canadians? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is right to speak about the cost of living. The cost of living is important for middle-class families and lower-class families. What is interesting is that they are against childcare benefits that reduce child poverty by 50% every month. They're against dental care for children and now for seniors. They are against investments in childcare services that in Quebec have shown us how important it is for gender equality, and now they seem to be against investments in housing, despite the fact that the Conservative leader didn't do much for housing when he was a housing minister. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to mention to the Minister that most things that he mentioned we voted for. However, What makes us angry and what makes Canadians angry is that this government has absolutely no efficiency when it comes to taking care of its own business. Passports, the armed forces, the border, immigration, the cost of living, and the cost of living. The list is long, Mr. Speaker. That is government in action. And what's this government doing right now? It's butting into provincial jurisdictions. It's not their business. So they can't even handle their own business, but they try to get into provincial businesses. When will the government finally step up and respect its own jurisdictions rather than butting into provincial jurisdictions? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to remind my honourable colleague that in his riding there are about 12,000 families who every month, on the 20th of every month, get the Canada Childcare Benefit. That's about $500 every month, non-taxable for these families, which reduces poverty by 50% in his riding. Unfortunately, one of the first things that the Conservatives did in 2016 was to vote against this childcare benefit that is beneficial to millions of families and children in his riding in Canada. The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost of his own incompetence. His inflationary policies have increased the cost of everything. Rent has doubled. Inflation has reached record levels. Violent crimes make our streets less and less safe. Quebecers have less and less purchasing power after having almost shattered in Ottawa. Now, the Prime Minister has passed the last 2 weeks announcing that he now wants to shatter various provinces, including Quebec. Can the Prime Minister simply just mind his own business for once? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, what we hear is the party of inaction speak to us. If we were to listen to the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, to do nothing is to solve all the problems. No, Mr. Speaker, the people watching us at home know that we have to invest in housing, that we have to invest in childcare, that we have to invest in a green future. And if you want to talk about success, let us just look at the biggest private investment in Quebec in history. We managed to attract the biggest investment in Quebec in history. We believe that to invest is to succeed, not only today, but in the future as well. The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Like the Minister has often said, people at home knows that after 8 years, the Prime Minister is the only one responsible for his own incompetence, his own field of incompetence. It's not for nothing that Quebec doesn't want him to have him around anymore. He wanted to interfere in housing, and Quebecers have seen the price of their rent double. He wanted to interfere in the lives of the middle class, and he's shattered young people's dream of becoming homeowners one day. And now workers, middle-class workers, have to turn to food banks. When the Prime Minister interferes, Quebecers foot the staggering bill. Will the Prime Minister finally listen to common sense and put aside his plans to meddle further in areas where he has clearly shown he has absolutely no skill or competence? The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I don't think that when it comes to competency and skill, we have any lessons to learn for the Conservatives. Every time we have been here for Canadians, the Conservatives have always voted against. They're against childcare. They're against investments in housing. They're against investments for seniors. Mr. Speaker, if we were to listen to the Conservatives, we would say no to everything. But no, in today's real world, those who are doing well are investing in our country. We're investing in healthcare, in education, and in housing, Mr. Speaker.
We will not listen to these Conservatives. FPC is a joke. Like, I know you guys know that.
Those who are confident will invest in their population. That's what we do, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many tangible measures we can take to tackle the housing crisis. I proposed 12 of them this very morning, and I'm ready to discuss them with the Liberals at any time. They have my number. Because their only measure right now is to impose ill-conceived conditions upon the provinces, otherwise Ottawa will cut off the funds. The Prime Minister is bluntly telling the provinces that refuses blackmail. You want us to respect your areas of jurisdiction? Then do without federal money. Mr. Speaker, it's our money. In short, no concrete measures, just threats to the provinces and municipalities. So is this the Liberals' plan? It sounds like a Conservative plan. The Honourable Minister for Development. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to hear the question from my colleague because I read the report that he's mentioned, and he worked upon that report. In the report, he put forth a number of stakeholders, and these stakeholders have spoken positively of housing rights interveners that have commended the fact that we want to build more houses. Here, we're not going to just write reports, we're going to build houses. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, Ottawa's conditions aren't speeding up housing construction, they're slowing them down. Instead of paying the money now so that Quebec can actually go to work, the Liberals are bickering until 2025. The money they're holding back is for infrastructure like waterworks and waterways. That's the first step. Unless the Liberals want, perhaps, housing without drinking water on a wasteland. Imagine, we're just at the stage of putting in running water. We're not even talking about building buildings yet. And already the federal government is hampering everything, slowing everyone down. So why not just pay the money now and tackle the housing crisis right now? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The whole light blue, dark blue rhetoric over on the other side, it's all the same. We can't on the one hand say that we want to help people and then vote against, or say that you're going to vote against measures that we have announced this week. The one that he has just mentioned is in last week's announcements. We have announced a fund to help house builders, a fund to defend renter rights. We've announced a fund to make sure that we will have an industrial catalogue to build more rapidly. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're not just writing reports, we're building houses. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Études-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, under the Liberals, 1 child in 4 goes hungry after 8 years. The cost of housing has doubled. People are sleeping in tents, and the use of food banks has now become the norm. The Prime Minister is failing in his own responsibilities, and his inflationary spending is creating chaos. And he has the sheer nerve to lecture the provinces by invading their areas of jurisdiction with his incompetency. Will the Prime Minister listen to the Premier of Quebec, who is urging him to withdraw from our area of jurisdiction and simply mind his own business for once? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we're happy to do so with the collaboration of the municipalities of Quebec, including Lévis and the government of Quebec. 8,000 affordable housing units over the next few months. That is the highest level of affordable housing units built by a government for Quebec since the beginning of Quebec's inception. That is why we're working hand in hand with the government of Quebec. They're talking about fields of jurisdiction and competencies, but the least competent is the leader of the Conservatives, who, in his time, built 6 entire housing units.
Member from St. Albert, excuse me. St.
Michael
Albert,
Cooper, this is
Edmonton.
Let's get it going.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday at the public inquiry, it was confirmed that CSIS briefed top Liberal officials that Beijing interfered in the nomination on behalf of the member for Don Valley North. Today, the Globe and Mail is reporting that a top Liberal broke the law by leaking classified information that resulted in the member for Don Valley North being tipped off that he was being monitored by CSIS. So who broke the law? What is the name of that top Liberal?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Speaker, thank you. I thank the member for the question. In regards to the fact that, unfortunately, foreign interference is a problem that some foreign state actors have taken to try to undermine our democracy. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not new, and that's precisely why we have taken this matter so seriously. It's precisely why we have initiated a number of steps to strengthen our democracy. And, Mr. Speaker, we've all agreed to the inquiry, and we want to allow that work to continue so Canadians have a full picture of the issues around foreign interference.
The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, that non-answer is completely unacceptable. Enough of the cover-up. Only a handful of Liberal officials were briefed by CSIS. We now know that a top Liberal broke the law, undermined the work of CSIS, and put the partisan interests of the Liberal Party ahead of national security. So, when did the Prime Minister first learn of this criminal leak, and did he refer it to the RCMP?
True. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, all parties in this House agreed to the terms of reference for Justice Hogue's inquiry. Mr. Speaker, it's important for Canadians and all members of this House that foreign interference is not partisan. It's important that we allow Justice Hogue to continue in this work so that Canadians can have a full picture surrounding any attempts of foreign interference in this country. Mr. Speaker, an interim report will be delivered in May, and I look forward to the recommendations on how we can strengthen our democracy.
The Honourable Member from Yukon.
Speaker, our government signed bilateral agreements with all 13 provinces and territories this past March. A few weeks ago, in my writing, 3 agreements were announced with the territorial governments to invest a total amount of nearly $86 million to improve health care, access and services for the Yukon. Can you elaborate on what this health investment means for those living in the Yukon and for all Canadians to the Minister of Health? Thank you.
I'm certain that the Honourable Member from Yukon wasn't asking the Speaker to elaborate, but indeed the Minister of Health to elaborate. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, would also be very enthusiastic about the bilateral agreements that have been signed across this country. And I want to thank the member for Yukon, not only for his extraordinary work as a member of Parliament, but as a physician and a chief medical officer, the work that he's done to promote public health and better health for Canadians across the country really has to be commended. And I was so proud to be with him in the Yukon to make an announcement that's going to see more doctors, more nurses, reduce backlog, improve access to care, make sure that we allow our seniors to age at home. It's part of a $200 billion plan to take action across the country.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, we know that he's not worth the cost or the corruption, and we've seen that with the $60 million that he spent on his failed Arrive scam. Last year alone, he spent $21 billion on outside consultants, and his favorite hand-picked consultants, GC Strategies, are being hauled before the bar of this House to answer questions under threat of imprisonment for lying to parliamentarians in the inquiries about this Liberal scandal. It's a historic tool for historic levels of corruption. So in the budget next week, will the Prime Minister cut the corruption in his government?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as we have said time and time again, when it comes to the procurement process, Canadians and all parliamentarians expect the process to be followed, expect laws to be followed. And Mr. Speaker, this is precisely why we have supported the work of the committee. CBSA has already initiated a number of measures to improve the procurement process. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to make those improvements so Canadians have trust in our procurement systems.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The procurement system that they're presiding over is so broken that millions of dollars are being paid to firms who add no value and do no work to contracts. Just last year, $21 billion on outside contracts, and this NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost or the corruption of their $60 million Arrive scam that saw GC Strategies paid $20 million but did no work and added no value. For their failed Arrive scam, Canadians got lies, fraud, and forgery. Will they cut the corruption in their budget next Wednesday?
And ask all members, please, to not take the floor while another member is speaking. That's recognized by the Speaker. In particular, I might ask the member from, I believe it is from Timmins James Bay, to please make sure that his comments are only done when he has the microphone or when he has the floor. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's ironic coming from Conservatives that these very same companies that were also awarded contracts under Conservative leadership for millions of dollars, that Conservatives did nothing to fix the procurement process. But Mr. Speaker, rest assured, Canadians can know that our government takes this exceptionally seriously. It's precisely why we've already implemented changes, something that Conservatives ignored for years. We are not going to do that. We are going to build trust in the procurement system, something Conservatives have failed.
Isn't she smart?
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, this House will make history when one of the favourite contractors of this NDP Liberal government is hauled before the bar. The Parliamentary Secretary just said that GC Strategies got contracts from Conservatives. Actually, Speaker, you know when GC Strategies was founded? In 2015. The company was founded in 2015, and they did extensive business with this Liberal government. They couldn't get a sole source for the Arrive Scam app. So can the government explain why this company got so much work after being founded in the same year that they took government? And will this government finally cancel their costly criminal corruption?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
The member across knows not to use such language, and he knows that there's no evidence for the kind of language that he's using that supports that.
Now McKinnon is the boss,
government, as well
saying
as
you
opposition
can't talk to
parties,
me like,
all voted to bring this gentleman before the bar of the House of Commons, expecting answers. Parliamentarians are entitled to answers. We voted to get the answers just like they did, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Right. Pretty straight.
The honourable member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been unwavering in its support for our ally Ukraine. With the values of all democracies threatened by Russia's illegal invasion, we have been there every step of the way, doing our part to ensure Ukrainian victory. My riding of Winnipeg South Centre is home to thousands of Canadians of Ukrainian descent, and in recent months we have welcomed thousands more fleeing the war back home. Earlier this year, this House passed the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Unfortunately, Conservative opposition prevented this Parliament from signalling unanimous support. There is good news, however, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister of International Trade inform this House of important developments related to this critical and...
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
Not a fan. Mary Ng is gross.
That, in Ukraine and Ukraine Parliament have passed the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Despite Conservative opposition, despite their opposition, Ukraine's Parliament unanimously passed this agreement and have called this agreement one of the most modern, high-standard agreements in the world. I'm looking forward to putting this Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement in use because I'm going to take a business delegation to Ukraine so we can work on their rebuilding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
Ing is no good,
I know
guys.
it's Wednesday, and
I've seen
people
her
are all
before, and
excited.
she's in a very powerful
Let's have the last couple of questions. The honourable member from Courtenay, Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, First Nations in BC have suffered enormous loss through their 200-year history of colonization, including the devastating loss of language and culture. Although nations continue to make tremendous progress revitalizing their languages, the Liberals' new formula on funding means a 60% cut to language programs in BC. Preserving and revitalizing Indigenous languages is an essential step to reconciliation. Will this government remember its most important relationship with First Nations and act with urgency to ensure sustained and long-term funding to language programs in British Columbia?
We'll see.
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me just first say that I fully agree with the member opposite about the need to preserve Indigenous languages and restore them when they've been so cruelly ripped away from First Nations communities for decades. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, in my own riding, Matawa Tribal Council provides First Nation language training and support for First Nations communities all through Northern Ontario, supported by this federal government. I'm very proud of the work they're doing, and we will continue to work on this preservation with First Nations across the country.
The honourable member from Spadina, Fort York.
The government's defense policy, Our North Strong and Free, is the latest in Liberal smoke and mirrors. It rightfully abbreviates into NSF, which Canadians know means non-sufficient funds. Spread out 20 years, it has insufficient funds, and by insufficient, I mean $0 this year. There's nothing for tactical helicopters, maritime sensors, and military housing. Mr. Speaker, with CAF members using food stamps and sleeping in tents, Liberals provided nothing for housing in 2024 and 2025. Is the Prime Minister aware that his facade policy will keep CAF personnel and their families in tents for years?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And perhaps I should send a copy of our new policy update for defence to the member opposite, because it's quite clear he hasn't read it. But what I can tell this House, Mr. Speaker, is this is a historic investment in new capabilities, in maintaining the equipment, in ensuring that we can not only support the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, but also grow our numbers. There is money for housing. There is money for other supports. And, Mr. Speaker, there is a new focus for the Canadian Armed Forces in the defence of Canada that will make us strong at home to help us be strong around the world.
Et voici la fin de la période.
That ends question period, I understand.
All right, guys, we are going to wrap it up because for a couple of reasons. I'm going to go and find that Trudeau stuff right away. So in 15 minutes, check back. I'm going to be doing Trudeau live, whatever his testimony is. It's 20 after 4 right now. It's 4:20 somewhere. Get it going. And hey, bud, what's up? Yeah, so we're going to go and find the Trudeau testimony and put that out as quickly as we can. Other videos to come. Thank you all so much for watching. Today's Wednesday was a little bit lower than it would normally be for like entertainment value, because where was Trudeau? Everybody's wondering, where is Trudeau? They know he's testifying somewhere. We're going to go and find that, get it back up online here as quickly as we can. Thank you all so much for watching. We are back tomorrow, and we will see what comes out of the testimony that's delivered today, because I'm pretty sure it will be on the docket and on the House of Commons floor. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada, trying to learn about Canadian politics and share that with my people as I learn. That's it. We'll catch you next time. Thank you all for watching. We're out. Gonna go find Trudeau. Where is he?